So now that I've deployed my system, what do I do next? Well, step 7 is initial data load. We're structured that by default what we're going to do is we're going to automatically, incrementally keep this MetricSmart up to date. We didn't go into it previously, but you have the ability for each event to say how often you want to query for new instances of that event. Maybe I want to check every minute or every hour or every day, or maybe I want to put in specific times throughout the day when I'm going to check for data updates. And what we do is we don't grab everything in the database. We just grab the things that have changed since last time, and you can specify here how often you want to look for changes. But when you first define the system, you don't want to wait until a certain time interval to go out and start loading it up. You might want the ability to say, well, I want to load up the last month's worth of data, or I want to load up all the data in my database into my MetricSmart, meaning query the database for all the raw data I have, and then calculate the metrics that I'm interested in and store those calculated metric values. Because an important part of the way we work is that when a user brings up a dashboard and needs to populate it with data, they don't go back to your raw data. They go to our MetricSmart to get that. So of course that means that you can have one user or 1,000 users and it makes zero difference on the load on your back-end systems. And because the data in our MetricSmart is fully calculated and dimensioned by all the different fields that we selected, it means that I have very fast access to that data in a variety of ways, and we'll see that in a moment. So before I actually load the MetricSmart, I'm going to go out to my Windows services, and I'm going to start up the Insight server. This is a service which is going to join multiple data sources in memory, offloading that work from your back-end databases. And if I start the database adapter service, well, this is a service that knows how to do data transformations in memory. Again, offloading that work from your back-end systems. I click on check status and see that we are connected. I turn on the watch so I can see what happens, and then I click the execute button. The system is now going off and querying my SQL Server, my Oracle, and my Excel system, pulling the data back that I require, generating the metrics that I've defined, storing the calculated metric values in my MetricSmart, and when I see this event sent message, I know that I'm done. So I now have my MetricSmart fully populated, and the next thing I can do is to build out a dashboard using those metrics. So I'm going to go to step 8, which is my dashboard designer, and I'll of course need to log into this. Everything is fully secured, but what you'll note is that even the act of creating dashboards is a web-based tool, so there is nothing that needs to be installed to allow someone to build out a dashboard. It's simply a matter of pointing them to the right URL and turning on the permissions for someone to allow them to build a dashboard. We saw the Speedwell dashboard before. This is what a blank dashboard looks like when you first install Altosoft Insight. There's a top section that shows me various data displays that I can use to display my metrics in a variety of ways. There's a header area, a menu area, and then the main body of the system. And of course I can move all these around, and if I want to display, say, my revenue data, I can simply drag out some display such as a line chart, and at minimum all I need to do is to select the metrics, and these are the ones we created, by the way: revenue, forecast, and percent of forecast. If I select revenue and click finish, so now I see my revenue displayed in a graph, and that's all I need to do to build out a dashboard component. But of course there's much more I can choose to do. If I go back into my properties, there's a lot you can do with legends and titles and tooltips to dress it up. But what I really want to do here is I want to take my revenue, and now revenue is one line on this chart, but I can always have multiple data series so I can compare revenue to something else. We'll look at forecast in a moment, but for now let's just focus on revenue. What if I want to look at revenue versus last year's revenue? Well, I can always take any one of my data series and say shift it. In this case, shift it by 1 year. So now we're going to be looking at revenue versus last year's revenue. And we'll see in a moment that I can drill down into this in the same way that we saw from the Speedwell dashboard, and then user can click on it and break it down by any dimension we've selected. Before we do that, let's create a different kind of a display. Maybe I want to look at not just the revenue over time, but I want to see who are my top performing sales reps. So a good choice for that would be a pie chart. And we're still looking at revenue data, But in this case, I want to see the revenue data broken down by employee. Maybe I want to see my top 6 employees as an example. So now I'm looking at the revenue for my top employees. So let's go a step further. What if I want to look at some more details of this data, which would often be rows and columns of numbers? Well, you can always create additional pages within your dashboard. So let's actually create one inside revenue here. So it's indented under revenue. And we'll put the details in here. And in my details tab, I'm going to drag down a time grid. It's a nice way of looking at a grid of data broken down by time period and then any other dimension we want. So again, here we start with revenue. And I'm going to call this total for a reason you'll see in a moment. In a grid, multiple data series correspond to multiple columns. So maybe in addition to looking at the total revenue, I also want to look at the revenue by employee. If I click the fill button, what you'll see is I get a data series for each employee. And if you look at the details here, the total column is looking at revenue with the total value for each breakdown. Whereas if I go to an individual, you'll see that we're looking at revenue, but only for that individual. So similarly, you can create any data series selecting any dimension you want. And of course, if we look at these dimensions, the system keeps track of all of the legal values that it's seen across all these dimensions. As far as timing, the default here would be to look at a year's worth of data aggregated per month. Now, of course, maybe you want to look at it per week or per quarter or per other interval. You can choose any aggregation interval you want as well as what time period you want to look at. Do you want to look at the ongoing quarter or the previous week? There's many ways you can choose to set that up. If I look at the drill down, this is showing me employee, city, and country. These are the dimensions we created, as well as a time dimension for month. So what does this buy me? What this means is that I can take any of these in any sequence. So maybe I want to see the revenue broken down by month, but within a month I want to see it broken down by country. So I move country right under month. And within a country I want to see it by city. So I'll move city up. Now I've got a column for employees. I don't need employee. I can take any dimension I don't need to use and simply turn it off. So now it's month, city, or excuse me, month, country, and city. If I say finish, what we see now is a grid showing me a column showing me total revenue as well as revenue for each employee. I see it by month. Within a month, I can drill down into that and see it by country. And within a country, I see it by city, exactly what we specified. Now, if I were to go back into this, maybe I don't need to see it by month, country, and city. Maybe I'm primarily interested in, I just want to see the breakdown per country and city. All right, maybe I care about month, but only within a city, as an example. The point being that I can rearrange this. If I put month under city and close this, now what we see is the overall breakdown by country, by city within a country, and then by month within a city. So hopefully what you've seen is that you've got a lot of flexibility once you've got these dimensions available to be able to use them for any given display in any way you want. So maybe a territory manager wants to see one breakdown where a product manager might want to see a different breakdown. If I go to events, this allows me to turn on the capability that I want to see not just the aggregate statistic, but I want to allow the user to drill down through the aggregate data and see the individual orders that made that up. And I can even take certain fields within that and turn them off. So maybe I want to see all the fields but the employee field. And we'll see the effect of that in just a moment. Now, final thing I'll do here is that we did create the forecast and percent of forecast, so let's make use of those. We've already seen revenue, and we'll see that again. But I want to, in this case, compare revenue with forecast. So let's create another series here for my forecast.